Hi, my name is Jonna and I play football for Chelsea FC and for the Swedish national team. And you are listening to the Blue Day podcast. Chelsea!
Fellow Chelsea supporters, here at the Blue Day podcast, I am delighted to welcome this individual on the podcast today. He is a man who made 76 appearances for the club, scoring 23 goals. He played with the likes of Clive Walker, Colin Lee, and a certain co-host of this podcast, Gary Chivers. Here is Alan Mays. Alan, welcome to the Blue Day podcast. How are you?
Very well, thank you, and thanks for inviting me.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure. Just want to sort of start, if I may. Who influenced you to become a professional footballer?
Various schoolmasters, I suppose. From an early age, very early age, I knew that I wanted to be a footballer. You're going to have to forgive me, Chelsea fans, but I was a regular visitor to White Hart Lane. Jimmy Greaves was my idol, though he was a Chelsea player as well, as you know. And I thought he was fantastic. So he was a big influence in terms of wanting to be a footballer. And, that the determination was there from an early age that that's what I wanted to do. And I was fortunate to have 17 years in the end.
What was you like at school in regards to football? Was you a striker then, or was you playing different positions?
I was always a goal scorer, but around the time that I was getting a number of offers from professional clubs, I was playing sort of midfield for the county, but always wanted to, I suppose, play up front. So, yeah, a striker at heart, I suppose.
And back to your point when you supported Tottenham, did you go to many games to see Mr. Greaves live?
Oh, yes. Yeah, some of the great games as well, where he scored that fantastic goal against Manchester United. But he just had such composure when he finished. I wish I had some of that during my career. He was very skillful, I suppose he was very much a role model.
He stood out a lot from other strikers in that era.
Yeah, I mean, he even used to shoot from corners. Honestly, on his left foot, it was. I can remember that. But whilst, like a lot of strikers, he might not be in the game for long periods of time, he always pop up and was likely to score. I mean, he's got such a fantastic record. I mean, as strikers, most of us keep a record, a sort of ratio of goals per game. But his was really beyond compare.
It's a shame he didn't get many caps for England as well. I think that's sort of something that will sort of bug a few supporters because of his ability, and he just didn't sort of get the caps that I feel that he deserved.
That's right. And I saw his documentary. I know he had injury problems in and around the World Cup. So that was desperately unlucky for him. But then a certain Jeff Hurst saw us win the World Cup. So his loss was Jeff's gain. And obviously, you never know what might have happened if Jimmy had been playing. So, but yeah, fantastic player.
Now, it was in December of 1980 you signed for Chelsea from Swindon Town when I looked at the research, the fee was around about £200,000. How did this move come about, and what appealed to you about moving to Chelsea?
I had a phone call from Jeff Hurst one evening. I nearly put the phone down because I thought it was one of the lads winding me up. Fortunately, I didn't. To say I was not back, Jeff Hurst, I mean, the legend that he is, to speak to him about the opportunity of joining Chelsea, who are a massive club, even then, albeit in the then second division, it was just a fantastic opportunity. I had quite recently had the manager at Swindon call me into the office and tell me that Spurs had made an offer, but the club had turned it down. So I'm not sure if you're aware, I didn't sign at the first time of asking. It was actually a month or two after I first spoke to Jeff, because I suppose I was hoping that as big a club as Chelsea was, I obviously wanted to play in the first division, but eventually I decided to join Chelsea, and knocked out by the stature of the club, the first time going to Stamford Bridge, and as I say, I knew it was a massive club. It was a massive move.
So it's fair to say that Jeff Hurst was quite influential in your decision, and obviously because he was the manager at the time as well. So how influential was he with you moving to Chelsea? As you just said, he was the guy who scored in the 1966 World Cup. What was he like as a coach?
Oh, it was a huge factor, Jeff Hurst, as well as, the club. He was a lovely guy. He was a good coach. He had Bobby Gould with him, who I had huge respect for as a striker, what he'd achieved in the game. So, I just thought he was a very, very nice guy, maybe too nice. I don't know, in terms of football management, if that's fair to say, because obviously he moved on, which was very disappointing as far as I was concerned, because he bought me. I wanted to deliver for him because of the fact that he had faith in me. Both Jeff and Bobby were a huge factor early on. So, yeah, to have a legend such as Jeff Hurst say, I want you to come and play for me, was, brilliant at the time.
You signed for the club. Obviously, having Jeff Hurst as coach, is quite a big factor. Who did you get on well with in the Chelsea team in the early days of your time there?
Got on quite well with everyone, really. There were a lot of young lads around, very talented lads like Gary Chivers, Mickey Fillery in particular. I got to know Clive Walker quite well because he was local to where I lived. Mickey Droy was a big influence as a player, huge respect for him as a player and a captain. And I got on very well with Graham Wilkins, actually. As a player, I thought he was a very good player and quite unlucky in the scheme of things during his spell at Chelsea.
You mentioned Mickey Droy. Not many people sort of have spoke about him. What was he like as a leader? Because he played as a centre-back and he played many games for Chelsea. But what was he like as a sort of a leader and all-out captain?
Well, he led by example. He was a very good player. I think people forget that. I mean, he was a huge lad and he could sort of head it further than some lads could kick him. But he could play. But when I say lead by example, we won at QPR, who were top of the league on Boxing Day in my second season. And we played on AstroTurf. And he came off. I remember John Neal saying that we had to treat it as a normal game because it was a very difficult surface to play on, and that we don't pull out of tackles, obviously pressing what was a very good QPR side. and he came off with grazes and scars all over his body because of this surface, the AstroTurf, and that sort of epitomised the player he was and the leader by example that he demonstrated. He was a good lad.
What was the feeling amongst the players when you used to go to grounds like QPR, and I think even Luton had the AstroTurf as well? Did you guys obviously enjoy playing on that surface? And
not happy. It's a completely different scenario back then. The surface, it was really bumpy and skiddy. I've got that game on video, and you can see lads sliding around. Although it was one of the most memorable games for me, because against the odds, we won 2-0 on Boxing Day. I scored the second goal. Massive Chelsea support there. And just a great game to play in. The thing was, there was no expectation that we were going to win, especially on a surface like that. So to come away with winning 2-0 against top of the league on that pitch, and again, it was horrendous. You asked me what it was like. No player would have wanted to play on that every week. I mean, they played on it every other week and managed to come to terms with it. They were a good side. So that was quite memorable for a number of reasons.
Now, you made your debut for Chelsea on Boxing Day the year before against Luton. When I was, again, sorting out my research, I didn't realise back then that Chelsea would play 2 games in 2 days. 24 hours later, they played Bristol City. What was that like, playing 2 games in 2 days?
Well, it wouldn't happen now, as you know, but
No.
Tough. And I think, from memory, Chelsea lost midweek. I know I'm right in saying that the day that I first came along to Stamford Bridge, we had a very tough training session on the cinder track, as it was at Stamford Bridge. So I'm not sure if everyone felt 100% physically fit when we played Luton, and they were a good side. They were top of the league. And I think we were probably outplayed. The players that I spoke to were saying that they'd been struggling over that particular period. And obviously there was a lot of expectation that I would come in and immediately have an impact. Certainly on my debut, unlike other clubs that I played for, that didn't happen, unfortunately. But that's how it goes sometimes.
You did score your first goal for the club against Shrewsbury Town in January 1981. What was that moment like for you to get off the mark for your new club?
Yeah, huge relief. I think I was reading that it was actually Gary Chivers that played it across. But yeah, that season, talking about statistics, we were really struggling for goals. And again, I have to accept that it was my job to change that. And I got 4 in 10 games, which at the time wasn't deemed a reasonable return. And I accept that. These days, it probably would. But it was a tough start. Sometimes it takes you a while to settle in. Probably didn't hit the ground running those first few games, and then Jeff left, obviously. So it was a tough baptism, massive club, massive expectation. And, I felt that straight away because of the fact that, Chelsea needed to be back in the first division. And a lot of the onus was going to be on someone like myself, who previously scored a lot of goals and was expected to do that when I joined.
Did you feel then there was a lot of pressure on your shoulders to deliver, and the fact that they bought you as the striker to, as you say, get Chelsea back into the first division? Did you feel there was more pressure put on you than what there would be normally?
Massively. absolutely, in a nutshell. And you read so much these days, and there's lots of support for players that are maybe going through sort of confidence and mental problems. I think all the clubs these days have psychologists. Maybe I could have done with one of those back then. But when you join a club like Chelsea, who, had legends, absolute legends over many, many years, the expectation straight away is that you deliver, and that's fair enough. I accepted that. I certainly didn't deliver that first season in terms of goals, and I got the stick because of that. But you have to take that and move on.
Did you get support from your fellow teammates that they saw your quality in training? Did they give you support?
Well, I don't know. I hope so. Eventually, maybe after a little while. The big thing is that I should have taken on board and continued to do so is that Jeff Hurst and Bobby Gold were the people that thought I was good enough to make the difference, and whatever anybody else thought. And of course, you want the fans on your side. But the important thing, as I watch football these days, is never just about ability, whether it's goal scoring or general play. You've got to have that tough mental attitude to reach the very top. And if you're having a crisis of confidence, you've got to be tough enough to overcome that and play well more often than not. And that's sometimes difficult if you're a certain personality that can be affected by the ups and downs of modern day football. And there's always going to be those issues for every player. It's how you overcome it. And even back then, I was doing a little bit of reading about sort of positive mental attitude, but it's not quite as easy as that when you step out at Stamford Bridge, and that expectation is always there. And again, as a goal scorer, you can play quite well, you can work hard, and I like to think I was always professional, always put a shift in, but you have to score. Otherwise, you're not doing your job. It's as simple as that.
I think that sort of rings true now when you look at strikers. People talk about Timo Werner now, and people saying that he's not good enough, he's not scoring enough goals. But if you see what he does off the ball, he does a lot of the off the ball movements. He creates space for his teammates, and I think what you've just sort of described there rings true to this day about strikers.
Absolutely, and yeah, he works his socks off. But again, that first season, as we're discussing, you can use statistics in any way, but I scored 4 in 10, and I was sort of the target for abuse. Despite that, no one else was scoring. The team wasn't playing well. We weren't creating, and we weren't defending. I think everyone at the time would accept that, but that maybe just sounds excuses. It's not meant to be, but coming in to a massive club like Chelsea with that expectation, it was tough in the early days for sure.
Now, Chelsea had a new manager in the summer of 1981 in John Neal. What was your relationship like with him, and what was he like as a coach compared to what you were used to previously?
He was a good coach, very direct, honest, straightforward. And you look at his record, what he achieved ultimately, and, again, you probably put him in the legend category because of what he did for Chelsea, got them out of the second division. I remember initially some very good advice about getting in the box more often rather than peripheral stuff in and around where you're not going to score goals. So sort of that rang an alarm bell at the time, because he was quite sort of vociferous about that in one game in particular when we were on tour. And then we had a very good start. The second season I was there, and just reading reports about him saying that we had a very good chance of promotion, and we weren't far away. He didn't do it that particular season, but within 2 or 3 years he did get the club up. Unfortunately, I wasn't part of that, but he delivered in the end. So, a lot of time for him because of that. In the end, the relationship wasn't great because the last season I didn't play too many games, although I came in and scored. I was perhaps in and out, and then I left the club along with a number of players, but it wouldn't detract from what I think of him as a manager, because he was top class.
Mm. We'll discuss your departure and your subsequent final season just shortly, but the season you sort of mentioned that was more prolific for you, you scored 16 goals that season. However, the team again finished 12th that season. Why did you think the team was so inconsistent and not able to challenge for promotion?
I actually got 17, Keith. 16 on the record. I'll explain that. We played at Leeds, and that's another thing about John Neal, I remember. Because, we drew 3-3, and I scored the third goal. It was a goal. It was in, and Eddie Gray tried to knock it away, slid into the goal. I mean, there's no VAR then, but it was my goal. And John Neal in the programme, the following Saturday, gave me the goal as far as Chelsea was concerned. But I think on the record books, it was down as an own goal. So I'm not a happy boy about that. In terms of a return, it wasn't prolific as in previous clubs, but it was a good return on the number of games that I played. I felt I had a very good season, although, again, there were still ups and downs during that period as well.
What sort of stories have you got of that particular season? Because, again, you sort of scored quite a lot of goals. Clive Walker, when I did research, scored quite a few goals as well. Why didn't you think it just didn't gel, whereby the results were going to be there and Chelsea were going to be up there for honours?
We were capable during that season, as we showed at the time, beating anyone. But unfortunately, we were capable of losing games that we should have won. We were a young side. I mean, we had some great young players I've already mentioned, one or two. We had some very good forwards. But I think we lacked experience. If you look at the following season or 2 seasons later when Chelsea got promotion, some of the experience that they brought in, particularly in midfield. But we were a good side with some great individuals and some very good young players. We weren't a great team, unfortunately. Yeah. If we were, we would have been promoted. I mean, there was some hot games that I can remember where we played really well and we steamrolled sides, and then we'd go away to maybe a lower division side and lose. So that maybe lack of experience in certain areas cost us, because we were thereabouts during that season. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. And John Neal decided that some remedial work had to be done.
The season after, the 82-83 campaign for the club was hugely disappointing. They finished 18th in the old second division. You mentioned previously you didn't play many games that season. What was going through your mind at this stage of your career? Because you did touch on it earlier that you did pick up an injury, and obviously John Neal, looked as if he had other ideas. What was going through your mind at that particular time of your life?
I think the writing was on the wall that the previous season, going back to when I was playing really, I wasn't just scoring goals, I was playing really well. We had a very good cup run. And there was a standout game in particular where I'd scored quite a few goals in the FA Cup and we drew Liverpool. So I'm going back to sort of why it sort of went a bit pear-shaped. John left me out and I was not just upset, but a bit flabbergasted. I like to think one or two players in particular had said to me that they were too, because I had been playing so well. But obviously John had to pick a side to win, and credit to him. He did that, and the famous victory with Peter Rhodes-Brown scoring a great goal. I remember that. But it wasn't just the disappointment of being left out. It was the timing, which probably highlighted to me that despite the fact that I was playing so well and scoring goals, if he felt that I wasn't good enough to be playing at that stage, that had a big impact on the sort of mental process, really knocked me. And whilst I finished the season very, very well, I sort of thought at that stage that things could be changing. And I was right. He didn't pick me at the start of the following season. I scored a lot of goals in the reserves, and John put me back in. I scored, I think it was against Huddersfield, but I was in and out. And eventually I wasn't part of the team that last season that fortunately managed to just about scrape a result and stay in the division, because it really went pear-shaped at one stage, but I wasn't in the side. And again, you have to hold your hands up if John Neal didn't think I was the right player at the time. But the previous season was the big disappointment during that particular game, and I felt the writing was on the wall. And again, that mental toughness might have made a difference, because every player goes through that, and but it had a big impact. And then the following season, you mentioned an injury, but it wasn't just a normal injury. I had what I thought was sciatic pain, and I was taken for an X-ray, and I found out that I had osteoarthritis in my hip, which was not only debilitating, it was going to finish me eventually, which it did. And I've since had my hip resurfaced, which has been fantastic, which the PFA helped with. So that last season was very, very tough, both because, I wasn't playing, but also I didn't feel 100%. But I go back to the fact that you have to overcome these things. And I found that difficult. I'll admit that. A lot of players have come out in recent times and have sort of highlighted mental problems, but I was having a real tough time at that stage. And that's why I wasn't playing, because I wasn't playing well enough. And you have to accept it's part of the game, that sort of mental toughness. And, I know I'm repeating myself, but saying that, it was still a fantastic time. I'm saying some negative things, but it was a great club, fantastic support. Everywhere we went, the Chelsea fans were brilliant. I mentioned the game at QPR. It was just a sea of Chelsea fans one end, and we actually scored both goals that Boxing Day, that end. Clive Walker and myself, and I just remember the atmosphere mainly created by Chelsea fans. So, yeah, great. It was a fantastic experience to join such a famous club, but unfortunately it wasn't quite what I'd hoped for in terms of delivering for the fans, Jeff Hurst and the club as a whole.
You mentioned the QPR result on Boxing Day. Was there any other games that stand out for you as a Chelsea player that you look back on now and smile about?
Well, after being left out against Liverpool, we got through and we played Tottenham. And after having crowds less than 20,000, we had those two games at Stamford Bridge where there were 55,000. So that was a fantastic atmosphere to play in. And I scored against Spurs, although we lost 3-2. Mickey Fillery scored a great goal. I remember that. I got a couple against Cambridge. I've got one or two on video that I've seen, goals that I've scored. And playing away at Derby in the FA Cup, again, fantastic Chelsea support. And everywhere we went, Hull, Huddersfield, that there were always Chelsea fans there, but in numbers, not just a few. So they helped lift the team, whatever the result.
You mentioned the Chelsea supporters in that era. You must have had a sort of a good relationship with them, being that particular goal scorer and, again, trying to contribute as much as you can, because, the stories that I've heard of yourself was, you was a hard-working centre forward that gave everything on the pitch every single game. So I think Chelsea supporters surely must have appreciated that.
Thank you. I hope so. I hope people knew that I always gave everything. I was 100%. It's fair to say it was tough initially, but we've already highlighted that. Yes. But that second season, I like to think I turned their opinion round. The third season, again, it was difficult. I wasn't playing, and the club was struggling. So with a big club comes big expectations. So fans have got every right to sort of vent their frustration if the team are doing well, if individuals are not performing. But they were fantastic. Again, away support. I'll never forget some of the games that we played in. Didn't matter where you went, they were there, and you knew they were there. So,
in the summer of 1983, you left Chelsea. You went back to Swindon Town. How did that move come about, and what was the discussions like between you and John Neal at this stage?
John was very honest. He complimented me on the type of player that I was. You just alluded to the fact that he thought, I'd worked really hard, was very professional throughout, despite the issues in that final season. But I think quite a number of players left the club. There were a number of clubs interested, and it was a difficult decision. At the time, I was, I think, 31 at that stage, so I had to consider my future. And I obviously knew Swindon and a lot of the players there, that there was an opportunity, despite their lower division ranking, that there was a real opportunity and a buzz there. So, rightly or wrongly, I went back to Swindon, and I started scoring again. I got 20 in the following season. But thereafter, I got injured. And it's worth highlighting, you may remember Pop Robson at Chelsea. He phoned me up one day, and I actually went back in the second division, played for Carlisle. And that move was instigated by Pop Robson, who thought that Bob Stokoe should take me. And that was a very good move very late in my career. And Pop Robson, you talk about influencers, what a lovely guy he was. Worked his socks off every game, very good finisher. I mean, he was coming to the end of his career when he played for Chelsea, but he was a great lad, very, very good finisher.
Nice story. That's good. We want to talk about now football of today, and I've asked this question to all my previous guests, and some have been for it, some have been massively against it. Your thoughts on VAR, Alan?
Mixed. I'm for it when it works, but it doesn't always work. I think there was it a handball? There was a decision last night that went to VAR in the Champions League, which was terrible, I thought. But then you see one or two other decisions that seem to have worked out fair and reasonable. But we've just got to live with it now. But it's not perfect, that's for sure.
No, it certainly isn't. And I think, either at the end of this season or even at the Euros, if they sort of have their VAR there, I think there will still be some dodgy decisions made on that particular issue. But as you say, we just got to live with it, and it's here to stay. I can't see it sort of going anywhere. The fact that UEFA and FIFA are so for it, and they see this as the future of helping the referees. As you say, we just have to get used to it.
Absolutely, but hopefully it'll improve in years to come. I know they're tinkering with the offside rule and deliberate or unintentional handball, that sort of things. So, yeah, it's frustrating, but there you go. It is what it is.
Alan, just a couple more questions before I let you go for today. Your thoughts on Chelsea this season, and where do you see them finishing up this season?
I think they'll finish in the top four. I think they're a fantastic team. They pass it so well. They've got pace, makes such a difference, and they've got it in abundance. At times, you think they're going to steamroller sides and win by huge margins. That's not quite happened, but they're not far away. And that, bear in mind, they haven't lost for 9-10 games, and they're up there. I'd be very surprised if they're not one of the top four. And saying that, I felt so sorry for Frank Lampard, because I think he would have got it right in the end. And I think that was a wrong decision. That's my opinion. But irrespective, they've got a fantastic squad, as good as anyone. And if people like Werner start scoring, then they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in terms of winning it next year. But, top four, I would think.
Just finally, how do you look back on your career at Chelsea in those 3 years?
It was a fantastic experience. I've got to look at it like that, because Chelsea are a massive club, and to be part of, to have, a period of my career playing for a club like that. And whilst, I have to be honest, I didn't deliver what I was capable of, but my goal scoring record was not bad. 1 in 3. I felt I needed a bit more support, both from a playing point of view, but also from a building confidence point of view. But it's down to the individual, and I take full responsibility for not delivering what I felt I was capable of. But I still enjoyed it. Playing for Chelsea is special. They are one of the top clubs in the world, albeit a sort of lower division at the time. It was an experience.
Well, Alan, you certainly delivered today. Thank you very much for coming on to the Blue Day podcast for this special interview. I've enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. All the best.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.